everyone, and welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. Today's tutorial is such a good one. It is such a good tutorial. Today's tutorial is for the mini backpack from Kandou Crafts. Now I'm just gonna show you. Look how adorable this backpack is. First of all, you all know how much I love Caroline over at Kandou Crafts. Her bucket bags are one of my absolute favorite go-to gift projects. She came up with a sewer-friendly, confident, beginner-friendly mini backpack pattern. And if you follow me over on Instagram and Facebook, you know I have been on the hunt for one of these patterns for a while now. I love the idea of a mini backpack. I bought mini backpacks from Disney, from other places before, and honestly, they just don't look that great on me. I don't really like the size or the strap length, so being able to make my own has been on my list of goals for this year. Mission accomplished. This backpack is amazing. So I made a Christmassy themed backpack here. I used waterproof canvas and Miss Mac fabric. This backpack has this little pocket on the front with a magnetic closure. This front pocket is completely optional. If you just don't add it, you won't take anything away from the bag. So if you have like a really fun panel with some sort of inspiring quote or something funny on it, I would just skip the front pocket and just put that front panel right here. I used waterproof canvas for the base of the bag. This is just a nice thick gusset. On the top, we have a big zipper. When you open that up, we have a little slip pocket on the back lining panel. This is done with binding, but I have a trick to make it a little bit easier if you don't feel like making your own cloth binding. On the back, we have the most adorable straps. The top half is really soft and cushiony, made of fabric, and then the bottom half can be made using cotton webbing. I don't have cotton webbing on hand, so I actually made my own version of that using waterproof canvas, and I'm going to show you how to do that in the video today as well. And then, one more thing, totally optional, but please don't skip this. Just do it. You're going to love it. This little secret zipper pocket on the back. Look how cute that is. You can put your phone or your credit card, just things that you want to kind of keep closer to your body. Bam, right in there. I cannot tell you how much I love this pattern. It is so good, and it does look challenging. Look at these curves. You see these curves down here? These are not, for nothing curves, but you can do this. You can do this pattern. All of it is very enjoyable. The only part that might be difficult for you are those curves. And I'm gonna walk you through it. You can definitely make this pattern. I'm so excited for this pattern. So thank you so much to Caroline over at Kandou Crafts for not only making this bag pattern, but allowing me to film it. I do have a discount code for the pattern. It'll be down in the description. It does have an expiration date, so make note of that. I think this would be a perfect bag for, honestly, everyone. This would be a great teen bag, a great kids bag. It would be a great new mom bag if you just want to carry the basics, It's a great, if you don't want to carry a purse, but a little backpack, travel bag, park bag, everything bag. Honestly, I could probably take the next 3 months off of filming and just make as many of these as possible and sell them, because I absolutely love the finished look, but I also love the process of making this one, which, if you do bags with curves, a lot of you will probably relate to this. The finished look might be great, but you might not really enjoy the process of making the bag because curves are hard. This one, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be so fine, and you're gonna love it. So if you're not already a subscriber to the YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. Check out the comment section, because at the very top, I will have timestamps for every single step of this tutorial. This is not a short tutorial. This is going to be a very involved, in-depth tutorial. I want you to have everything you need to accomplish this bag. So use those timestamps while you're working on the bag. Just click on the section that you're interested in, and it'll take you straight there in the video. All right, let's get started. So before we get started, I just want to go over the pattern pieces. Now, for these pattern pieces, you're going to print them all out and then tape them all together and then cut them out. So you can see on these pattern pieces, we have these triangles with the letters, and we just have to connect them all together on these dashed lines or on the edge of the paper. You'll have 3 sheets where the pattern piece fits perfectly inside the sheet and there's nothing overhanging. So these ones you don't have to tape together if you don't want to. The main thing I wanted to mention here is that if your printer is like mine, my printer, it doesn't matter what setting I have it on, it is always going to include these margins along the edge of the page. And what that does is it cuts off my letters. So you can see this is actually supposed to be piece P. And when I try to line it up, you can see the triangle doesn't go all the way to the side, so I can't really line it up like I would like. However, what I want you to know is that this triangle goes all the way to the edge of the page. There's no margin included in the pattern, so you don't really need this. All you have to do is line up this piece on top of the other piece P where you have that dashed line. Just line up the edge of the paper right along that dashed line and everything is gonna line up fine. So if you run into the same issue like I do, that's the only thing you have to do. Every single join for these pattern pieces will have one side where you have a dashed line and then another side where it's just gonna go to the edge of the paper. So all you have to do is overlap your edge of the paper on top of the other piece that has the dashed line and line up the edges of the paper completely, line up the edge of the paper with that dashed line, and then you'll be fine. So for this bag, you're gonna need 3/4 of a yard of main fabric. Now I'm gonna be mixing up my fabric a little bit for the body of the bag, and then I'll use some accent fabric for the front pocket as well as the straps. You're gonna need 1 yard of lining fabric. Now I'll be using waterproof canvas for most of the lining today. That means I don't have to interface this with any sort of woven interfacing. That's why I like to use it. However, it is a little bit more stiff. And since we have rounded corners we're gonna be sewing today, it can be a little bit difficult using the waterproof canvas, but we'll go over that once we get to that part. I'm also gonna be using waterproof canvas instead of the cotton webbing. So in the pattern for the bottom of these backpack straps, she uses cotton webbing. I just don't have any on hand, so instead I'll be building my own straps using waterproof canvas. It's very simple and quick. I will also be using strips of waterproof canvas instead of the bias binding tape. I do not like working with bias binding tape, to be honest. It is difficult to make, it is difficult to sew with, and I just don't really like it. And since the lining of my bag will be waterproof canvas, I'm just going to cut 1-inch long strips of my waterproof canvas and sew that over as my binding. I will show you that when we get to the step. So for interfacing, I'll be using the woven interfacing right here. This is Woven Fuse from Got Interfacing. This is great for all of the cotton woven pieces just to make sure it doesn't stretch or fray. It beefs it up just enough. I'll be using fusible fleece for the main panels today. In the first bag, I actually used foam and it turned out wonderfully, but it does make the themes pretty thick. So instead I'll be trying out the fusible fleece today and we'll see how that differs. You're gonna want 2 yards of interfacing and about 3/4 of a yard of fusible fleece. The fusible fleece will also be used in the straps of the bag. It's also a good idea to have some sort of thicker, firmer interfacing on hand just for attaching magnets and for the top strap. You can have Decoville Heavy or Decoville Light. Either one of these will work great. There are going to be 2 zippers in this bag today, one on the back of the backpack, which is totally optional, and another one as the main zipper that goes over the top. For the main bag zipper, you're going to need an 18-inch long zipper with 2 zipper heads, so zipper tape is a great option to use today. And for that little secret pocket on the back, you're going to need an 8.5 cut of zipper tape and a zipper pull. So here's a bunch of the other stuff you'll see me using today. I'm gonna add some rivets to my bag, so I have my rivet press and my rivets to go with it. I'm using 9mm rivets from Emmeline Bags. You're gonna need 2 rectangle rings and 2 strap sliders. These are for the backpack straps. Each one of these is 1 inch. I also have my bag tag, which I will include on the outside of the bag. To help stick it all together, I have my 1/4-inch double-sided leather tape. This is very heavy-duty tape. You don't want to sew over this a whole lot, but it's going to help when you need to put something in place and make sure it doesn't move. I also have my Dritz 1/4-inch wash-away double-sided tape. This is fantastic as well. It's just not quite as strong as the leather tape. I'll be using my Beacon 3-in-1 glue. For the bobbin thread, I just have the standard Gudeman thread, and for the top thread, I'll be using a Mara 70-weight top stitching thread. For marking fabric, I have my white chalk pencil, my air erasing sew line marker. Of course, I always have a seam ripper and stiletto combo, and my turning tool today is this metal contraption. You can get this from Sew Sweetness. The needles I'm using are Microtex 8012 needles, and I'll also be using this hand hole punch for helping me with the rivets today. And as always, I have a 1-inch by 6-inch ruler for measuring out placement for pretty much everything. So here are pattern pieces A, B, and C. From pattern piece A, you're going to have 2 exterior panels. If you're using quilt cotton for these, each one of them need to be interfaced with your woven interfacing and also your fusible fleece or your foam. And then 2 lining cuts. Since I'm using waterproof canvas here, I don't interface these with anything. Now, if you have a fabric or maybe a panel that you really want to highlight, you can skip this front pocket altogether. You don't have to add this. This is just added on top of the exterior panel. So if I was using like a really fun inspirational panel here, I would just not add this top pocket here and just make it a very basic bag. That's totally an option. However, if you do want to add the pocket, you're going to need pattern pieces B and C. Pattern piece B, you're going to have a lining cut, so that's my waterproof canvas, and then an accent. This is just going to be for that front pocket panel. And then from pattern piece C, you're going to need 2 cuts of exterior fabric. I'll be using waterproof canvas for both of those. You're going to also want to cut a lining pocket. To do that, just fold along this lining pocket cut line back like that and cut 2 of your lining fabrics using this template. I won't be using fabric for my lining pocket today. Instead, I'll be using this mesh fabric and this single fold elastic along the top for that pocket. So if you want to use the fabric, don't forget, fold along this line, cut out 2 pieces of your fabric using this as your template, or you can try using mesh with me. Pattern pieces D, E, and F are our gussets. Now pattern piece D is the back gusset. This is going to go on the back of the zipper. From that, I have my lining cut and I have an exterior cut. My exterior cut does have that woven interfacing on it. My lining is waterproof canvas, and I think that's actually going to help firm this up a little bit so that the bag kind of takes a more firm shape around that gusset, because we don't add any sort of fusible fleece here. The only difference between the adult bag and the child side bag is the thickness of the bag. So make sure you note, if you want to make the child size bag, just fold along this blue line and trace your pattern pieces a little bit skinnier. Pattern piece E is going to be the front side of the gusset. This has a little curve on the bottom. I have my lining cut and my exterior cut. And pattern piece F is going to be for the bottom of the bag, that bottom gusset. I am going to be using this white waterproof canvas for the exterior and this pink waterproof canvas for the interior. Pattern pieces G, H, and I are going to be for that little secret back pocket on the back panel of the backpack. I'm using quilt cotton for each one of these pieces, and all 3 are interfaced with woven interfacing. Again, if you don't want to add this to the bag, you definitely do not have to. These are all optional. So here are all of the remaining cuts. From pattern piece J, you're going to have 2 exterior fabric cuts. These are going to be for the backpack strap. Like I said, I don't have cotton webbing, so I'll be building my own bottom of the strap. I'll be using 2 pieces of waterproof canvas. Each one of these is cut at 4 inches by 17 inches. I'll also be using waterproof canvas for the strap connectors. Each one of these is 4 inches by 3 inches. And then for that top handle on the top of the backpack, I'll be using a piece of waterproof canvas. This is cut at 4 inches by 13 inches. For the binding for the interior of the bag, I just cut some strips of waterproof canvas. These are both 1 inch by 40 inches long. If you're doing that front pocket, you're also going to need some magnetic snaps for the front pocket. Since I have these on hand, I'll be using them. I have 14mm magnetic snap rivets, and then the 14mm magnetic snap rivet die that goes with my rivet press. So to get started, grab your pattern piece B and just poke a hole through that center fastener mark right there. Lay this over the exterior pattern piece B. So this is the exterior fabric or your accent fabric. We'll just line it up right over that pattern piece. Line up all the edges and then just mark in that hole, which will mark placement for our magnetic snap. So now I'll just use my hole punch here to punch out that hole where I marked it. So here I have my male and female ends of my magnet, and then I have little caps that go on both of them. I have a scrap piece of Decoville Light. I'm just going to punch a hole through that as well. That's going to go through the back of the fabric just to help beef it up a little bit. So now I'm going to take the female end, insert it through that hole that I punched on my exterior fabric, flip this over, take my Decoville Light and lay it with the glue side down, and then I'll just take my cap and pop that on. Now I'm going to take my dies and I'm going to insert the one that looks like a male end so that I can press the female end in place. Pop that in. So I'm just going to take my magnet and lay it so that the female side is facing down and the cap side is up, and then I can just press this into place. And there we go. Now the magnet's installed. Now typically I would use prongs, and if you are using the prong magnetic snaps, you're going to want to make sure you cover the back of it with a piece of fusible fleece so it doesn't rub against the lining. Honestly, since I have this smooth cap right here, I'm not really worried about this rubbing against the lining and ripping it in any way. You could still cover this with a piece of fusible fleece, but I'm okay leaving it as is. Now with your front pocket exterior laying right side up, grab your front pocket lining and lay it right side down and line up all the edges. So I just use some clover clips to hold these two pieces right sides together. You're gonna then wanna mark a 3-inch opening on the bottom edge of your pocket. And now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew along all 4 edges except that opening at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have that stitched in place, let's go ahead and clip down these corners at a 45-degree angle. So I'm just gonna cut the corners off. And then I'm gonna go in and clip into the seam about a 1/4 inch from that 45-degree cut, just to help keep these edges nice and smooth. Now let's turn this right side out. So once you have it mostly turned out, you can grab your turning tool and just push that up in the corners. I like this turning tool because it doesn't have as pointy of a tip and it's not plastic. So for bags with the thicker fabric, a lot of times we have to put a lot of force into these corners. So once you have those corners poked out, what I like to do, since I'm using this waterproof canvas, is I'll just give it a good finger press along one edge, and then I'll take my iron and press along that edge. Today I'm using the Butyrol iron. So once I have one edge pressed, I'll just finger press another edge. If you need to go back in and poke out your corners just a little bit more, go ahead and do that before you press it. So then I'll just finger press it and then press that next edge with my iron. And then for this final edge, since we kept our opening fairly small, you should be able to just roll those raw edges in and create a nice flat bottom edge. And I just kind of tug at it to flatten it out and get it straight. There we go. And then I'll press it while I have it nice and straight. And then once I have all of my edges pressed, I'll then press the entire panel. So once you have your pocket all pressed, now all we have to do is top stitch along this top edge. We're going to top stitch one row at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, and then we'll top another row at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This will just prevent this top edge from rolling or getting too fluffy. It'll give it a nice professional look. Now grab your front exterior panel and mark a midpoint on the bottom edge of that panel. Take your pocket panel and we're gonna mark a midpoint on the bottom edge of this one as well. I like to just fold it in half and then I'll grab a pin and put a pin in the middle. Since this is all gonna be seen in the end, I don't really wanna mark it with a marker. Then using a ruler, measure 1 inch from the top bottom edge and make sure your pocket midpoint mark is centered with the midpoint mark on the bottom edge. And then I like to just grab some pins and pin the pocket to the exterior panel just to hold it in place and make sure it doesn't shift at the sewing machine. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along the 2 vertical edges in the bottom edge. We're gonna top stitch at an 1/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. Make sure you backstitch well at the top edges. Just adorable. I love this little backpack. So go ahead and put this front panel to the side. And now let's work on the flap. So for the top edges of these flaps, we want to press this top edge down a 1/4 inch. Since I'm using waterproof canvas, it can be very difficult to do that, which is why I'll be using this leather super sticky 1/4 inch tape. So what I'm going to do first is take the back side of my waterproof canvas, which is that rubbery side, and then using my ruler, I marked a 1/2 inch line down from that top edge. I'll then apply my super sticky tape right along that marked edge, and then I can remove the paper, and then I can just fold this top edge down to meet that marked line, wrong sides together, and that tape is going to keep it together perfectly because it's extremely sticky. You got to be careful when you sew over this tape because it can gunk up your needle. I always like to have some alcohol wipes next to me so that I can wipe off the needle if I need to after sewing over this tape. All right, there we go. And that's how I press down that top 1/4 inch edge. If you're using quilt cotton here, just use your iron. That will work fine. It's just heavier fabrics, maybe vinyl, cork. The double-sided tape just works much easier. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this for the other flap as well. So once you have both of those top edges pressed down, just grab one of them and we'll attach the other magnetic snap to this. So grab the pattern piece C and poke a hole where that magnetic snap dot is. We're just gonna lay this over our panel piece. You can do this on the right side or the wrong side. I'm doing it on the wrong side. Make sure it's all lined up well. And then just grab a marker and mark in that hole so you have placement for your magnetic snap. Now I'm gonna use my hole punch to just punch a hole where that dot is. And then I'll punch a hole in a small scrap piece of Decoville Light as well. Now with that flap with the hole in it right side up, I'm going to take the male end of my magnetic snap and just insert it into that hole. And then on the back, I'll insert my Decoville Light piece over it. And then I can grab my snap cap and just pop that over that. Now I'm going to use the die that looks like the female end and insert that into my rivet press. And then I'll take my snap and lay it snap side down and then just press this. And there we go. And if I was using the prongs, once again, I would cover this with fusible fleece to make sure this doesn't rub too much against the other side of the flap. Now grab both of your flap pieces and lay them right sides together. I'm using clips while lining up all of the edges just to hold this in place. And what you want to do is pull up these folded corners so that they can also be right sides together. So since I use tape, I just cut out the tape on the corners so I don't have to worry about sewing on it. So we're going to sew along this curved edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Start your stitching at this pressed edge. So not the 1/2 inch mark, it would be a 1/4 inch mark right here. We're not going to start all the way at the top of the edge. We're going to start a 1/4 inch down, go all the way around the bottom curve, and then stop a 1/4 inch from the top edge on the other side. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Alright, so now we can just kind of trim down the seam allowance at these top edges so that we don't have any bulk here. So I'm going about a 1/4 inch in and then just trimming towards the side just like that. And then I actually like to shave off some of the seam allowance just a little bit. I'm just taking off about 1/8 inch, or you can just kind of cut it in half. We don't want this seam to be too bulky. And then around the curved corners, take your scissors and just snip into the seam allowance, getting about halfway through that seam allowance. You want to get fairly close to the stitches, but not so close that you have to worry about them ripping. Now we can just take our pocket and turn it right side out. Now just fold down those seams on the side. If you find them to be a bit bulky, you can always trim them down some more. Now I'm going to push down on this bottom seam and get it as straight as possible. And then grab my iron and press this. If you're using quilt cotton, this should press really nice. I'll then fold down the top corner edges and smooth out the side edge and this rounded corner as much as possible, and then give that a press as well. And then I'll do the same thing on the remaining edge, just trying to tuck in those top corners and then press down the seam and the corner. And this should give you a nice flat finished pocket. She gives you a tip in the pattern to prevent this pocket from kind of curling out in the end. Fold the side with the magnetic snap, the long edges together just like that, and you'll see that one of these top folded edges juts out a little bit more than the other. Go ahead and clip these together with that bottom edge a little bit higher, and that will help the flap fold down and not away from the bag. This is optional, but it is a good tip. So now I'm actually going to top stitch around this entire flap at 1/8 inch seam allowance. She does suggest in the pattern to just baste this by hand. I'm going to do a row of top stitching, but then I'm going to go over that top stitching once again once we attach it to the bag. So for now I'm doing a row of top stitching 1/8 of an inch around all the edges. I will be using a zipper foot because we do get pretty close to this magnetic snap, and I find that if I use my regular presser foot, it'll kind of wave around it and it won't give me a clean, straight top stitch. So now grab your exterior panel that has that front pocket. And I first just like to see what it looks like on. So I'm just gonna snap these together. Isn't that cute? And it all should line up very straight. So unsnap it, take your flap and lay it so that it's snap side up, and just lay it and line it up with that top edge of your pocket. It should line up as the same size. And I'm just gonna grab a couple of pins and pin the flap up just like this to my panel. So now I'm going to top stitch over the bottom edge of my flat panel 2 times, one at 1/8 of an inch and another at 1/4 of an inch. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end both times. So now I just fold this down and finger press it, and then I'll grab the iron and I'll press it with the iron. And honestly, the longer this stays folded down, the flatter that will be. So if it's kind of pulling up a lot on you right now, don't worry about it too much. You can always put something heavy on it while it just kind of adjusts. But my other backpack, this stays flat perfectly fine. Isn't that just stinking adorable? So now's a great time to add your bag tag if you have one. Find the midpoint along the top edge of your main panel, and then using a ruler, line up the edge of the ruler with that midpoint line and along the top edge of your pocket flap, and just mark 2 inches above your pocket flap. So then I'm going to grab the washer for my bag tag and center it over that mark, and then mark my vertical lines for my bag tag. I'm going to grab a seam ripper and I'm just going to rip along those 2 marked lines. And then here is my bag tag. I have these little prongs, so I'm just going to poke those out, insert those into the marked lines, flip it over. Since I already have some fusible fleece back here, I don't need to add another layer. You definitely can if you'd like though. And then I'll pull these apart. So now I'm just going to grab a scrap piece of fusible fleece and I'm just going to add some glue to the back of it. You could also fuse this on if you'd like, but I find glue is just quicker. And then glue side down, I'm just going to cover the back of my prongs for my label so that these don't rub against the lining. There we go. Okay, after you have your tag installed, you can put this to the side. So now we're going to work on that back zipper pocket. Once again, this is optional, just like the front zipper pocket. If you're using zipper tape, cut it down to 8.5 inches long and insert your zipper pull. You can go and top stitch along these ends if you'd like, or you can live dangerously like I do. So now grab your back zipper pocket facing and you're just going to draw this same rectangle with the midpoint line on the back of it. She gives you the measurements for this in the pattern as well. Grab your back exterior panel and rotate it so that the top is on the right, the bottom is on the left, and it is right side facing up. You're going to place your pocket facing right side down on top of the right side of the back panel. And it's going to be 3/4 of an inch down from this top edge, which is actually the left edge of the bag, but because we rotated it, this is the top edge. And then it's going to be 1/2 of an inch down from the left side, which is actually the bottom of the bag. You understand, if you rotate it like this, there we go. This is where our pocket facing goes. You can use a couple pins here to help hold this in place so it doesn't move around on you. So now let's take this to the sewing machine and we're just going to sew along this inner rectangle. So not that midpoint line, just this little inner rectangle. This rectangle could be 3/8 of an inch wide or 5/8 of an inch wide. If you're using zipper tape, 5/8 of an inch works great. My zipper tape is from Sally Tomato. It's a little bit thicker. If you have a thinner zipper tape, maybe less than an inch thick, I would do the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance box. Once you have this stitched in place, grab your seam ripper and just start ripping along that midpoint line. It's gonna be a little tricky if you've got that fusible fleece or foam back there. You just need to rip a little bit, and then grab your scissors and insert that into the ripped hole and cut along this midpoint line. Cut all the way to the very tip of that triangle, and then follow the triangle down to the corners, and you want to cut as close as possible to the stitching without actually cutting that thread. Repeat this on the other side. So once you have this all cut, take that pocket facing and push it through that hole. Pull it to the other side. This is a little tricky to do with that fusible fleece on the back. When I used foam for this, I actually waited until I was completely done with this pocket before I basted my foam in place. So if you're using foam, I do suggest wait until you're done with this back pocket and then put your foam on. So I'm just gonna push down a little bit and then press it. We're just trying to hold this facing in place. And if the iron isn't enough, we can always add some double-sided tape to this. Okay, so I'll be honest, I'm having a hard time keeping this down because of this fusible fleece. I think if you wanted to make this easier, don't add the fusible fleece to the back panel until you're completely done adding this pocket, and then just add it over the pocket. What I'm gonna do is I'm taking some of this Dritz double-sided 1/4" tape, and I am just going to place it on the top of that seam that's on the back of the fusible fleece, just like that. And the nice thing is this tape really likes sticking to the fusible fleece. It sticks to it really well. So remove the paper, and then I'm just gonna fold down that seam to the other side of the fusible fleece, and that will hold it all down. So that makes this stay much, much better. It'll make it easier for me to apply my zipper. I only did it on the long edges. I didn't do it on the short edges. I think I'll be okay on the short edges, but if I run into any difficulties, then I'll add it to the short edges as well. So you can set this panel to the side for just a moment. Grab your lining pocket eye and lay it right side up with the flat edge up top. Grab your zipper and lay your zipper right side up. And when the zipper is closed, it should be up towards the left. And just line it on that top edge. Use some clips to hold it together. Now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4" seam allowance. Once you have this stitched on, just go ahead and rotate this so that the lining panel goes behind the zipper tape. So we want the zipper tape to stay nice and flat. So you can use an iron to press this in place if you'd like. Flip over your panel so the zipper tape is right side up and your lining panel is right side down. Grab your double-sided tape and just put down 2 long strips of your tape along the outer edges of your zipper. We don't want this to be seen in the end, so get it as close to the edge as possible. It's okay if it even overhangs the side a little bit. So now what we're going to do is take our back panel and just lay it over our zipper tape just like that, using the double-sided tape to help us hold this in place. So position this so that it's not overhanging the bottom. Here we go. So I like to just do one side at a time. So I'm going to remove the paper off the back of the top strip of tape. And then I'm kind of having to rotate this opening with my hands a little bit. And then I'll move my zipper all the way to the top. I can flip this up, remove the paper off of the other piece of tape, and then just flip this down and put it in place. And it should be nice and straight. All right, there we go. If you find that this kind of overhangs on the bottom a little bit, don't worry about it. It's fine there. Just try to get your zipper tape as straight as possible. I will say making this 3/8 of an inch would have been a little bit easier here. This 5/8 of an inch opening is a little big. So now we can take this to the sewing machine and we're just going to top stitch along this rectangle at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is going to hold down the seam and it's going to hold the zipper in place. Before you move on, just check the back and make sure it's all caught in the stitching, and that looks good. Now flip your main panel over so it's wrong side up and the right side of your lining pocket should be facing up. Grab your pattern piece H and lay that right side down, and it should match up with all of the edges. If it's just a little off, for example, my H piece, the flat edge extends farther than this edge, let that happen over there. So I'm going to match up the curved edge and the bottom edge. And then this side edge over here, if it overhangs, that's fine. I can clean that up after I'm done stitching. So now let's clip along all the edges. So once you have these clipped together, let's flip this over so we have the main panel right side up. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold this edge out of the way. And we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So you can see my H panel is a little bit bigger than my I unit. That's totally fine. I'm gonna stitch pretty much as close as I can to the zipper right here. So 3/8 of an inch from the shorter edge along here. And then I'll flip this up and I'll just continue stitching around the entire pocket at a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way to the other end. So we want to have this panel up though so that we make sure we don't accidentally sew through it. So just fold it out of the way as you're sewing. Once you have that pocket stitched all around, now what we can do is just anchor this bottom edge to the bottom of our panel. So all we have to do is just take this to the sewing machine and just right along this bottom edge here that lines up, it might even overhang a little bit, this bottom edge of your main panel, just stitch about 1/4 of an inch away just to hold it in place. There we go. Now if it overhangs a little bit, you can just trim that down. That's what I'm gonna do. All right, now your back panel is done. Like I said, if you're using foam, now would be a good time to apply the foam. So that's what I did on my first bag. I applied the pocket, and then after this was done, then I applied the foam over the back of the panel by just basting it on at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now we're gonna start working on our straps. This is gonna be the top strap of the backpack. This is the bottom of the backpack shoulder straps, and this is the strap tab. Since I'm not using webbing, I have to prep these before we can really create the straps. So starting with the backpack bottom straps, I'm going to take my waterproof canvas and I'm going to fold it wrong sides together along the long edges and just press with my fingers. You could also mark a midpoint line with a marker if you'd like, but pressing with the fingers should be fine. Open that up, and now I'm going to take the parallel long raw edges and fold them up to meet that midpoint line, wrong sides together. I'm going to grab some clips and I'm just going to clip these long edges up. Do this on both long edges. And you're going to do this for both of your straps. Now, you can just pick one edge to open up, fold down about 1/4 of an inch, and then refold your little hot dog. And what we're doing is we're just folding in the raw edges of one short edge. We only have to do this on one side. The other side is going to be in the seam allowance. So once you have that prepped, go ahead and fold the entire unit in half. So all of the raw edges, except for one short edge, should now be hidden inside of your strap. Once you have one strap prepped, go ahead and repeat that for the other backpack strap. Once both of your backpack straps are all prepped, go ahead and put these to the side. So now let's prep the rectangle ring strap tabs. So lay these right side down and fold wrong sides together along the shorter edges. So it should be that 3-inch edge. Do this for both of them. And then take that 3-inch raw edge and fold it up wrong sides together to meet that midpoint fold. And then just clip along that folded edge. Do the same thing on the other side. And this time it's perfectly fine to have both raw edges open on the sides. So just fold the entire unit up like a hot dog and then include the clips. So we're just hiding the long raw edges. Go ahead and do the same thing with your other strap tab. Once you have these done, go ahead and put them to the side. And now since we're here, let's just go ahead and do the same thing for the top strap of the backpack. So lay it right side down, fold it wrong sides together, meeting up those long edges, and just finger press. Open it up and then fold the long edges up to meet that midpoint mark. Do this along both raw edges. For this strap, you want to fold both of the short edges in about 1/4 of an inch. We don't want any raw edges on this strap since all of it will be seen. So I just eyeball it. It's okay if it's not the perfect size. So I just fold them in like that. Do the same thing on the other side. And then you can fold the entire unit in half like a hot dog. So all the raw edges are now hidden. All right, so here are all of our waterproof canvas alternatives for the cotton webbing. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take all these to the sewing machine and top stitch along all of the edges that are folded at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So for example, on my backpack straps, my folded long edges and my 2 folded short edges, I'll top stitch. You can top stitch on the raw edges if you like, but you don't need to. On the strap tabs, the 2 long raw edges will be top stitched, and on the top handle, all 4 edges are going to be top stitched. So now that you have these all pressed, all we have to worry about right now are the straps for the backpack. So take those 2 longer straps and take the rest and put them to the side. Now we're going to be adding the sliders. To do this, I will be using rivets today. You could also sew this at the sewing machine. Take the end of your strap that does not have a raw edge, so the end we folded down. Insert that from the bottom of the slider up and then over the top of that middle of your slider, and have it extend anywhere between 1 inch to 1.5 inches. If you're using rivets, 1 inch will be fine. If you're going to be sewing this, I would go down to 1.5 inches so you have more room. I'm just going to use 1 clip to hold it in place. I'm going to do this with the other strap as well. The goal here is to make sure both of these units are the same length. So I line them up and then just try to make sure they end up the same length. That way it'll look more even in the end. It's okay if they're a little bit off. Okay, so now I'm just going to take a fabric marker and mark a dot for the center on both of them. And I'm just eyeballing this. I'll then take my hole punch and punch a hole where that mark is through both layers of the strap. Then I'll grab my rivets and just insert them into that hole that we punched all the way through. Take the female end and just snap in place. Then all I have to do is insert this into my rivet press and press these rivets down. And there we go. That's my preferred method for attaching these hardwares, just because it's quick and it's easy and I have the material. If you don't, you can definitely just top stitch a little box with an X through it to hold these down. That will be very secure. You can go ahead and put these to the side for just a moment. Now grab your rectangle rings and your strap tabs, and we're just going to insert the strap tab into the rectangle ring and around one end. Use a clip to hold that together. Do the same with the other one. And now we can just take these to the sewing machine and top stitch along these raw edges at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I will be adding rivets to these as well, but we're going to wait until after the bag is stitched together, just to make sure we don't accidentally sew over the rivets during construction. So now grab one of your backpack straps and lay it so that the folded edge is up top. Grab one of your rectangle rings, and with that raw edge of the longer strap, insert it into the rectangle ring and then pull it up so that it goes through the edge of your slider that has the fold over, up over the top, and then down the other side. Just like that. Now remember, I'm using the child size straps, so these are quite a bit shorter than the adult size straps. Repeat this with the other rectangle ring and strap. You can go ahead and put these to the side for just a moment. So now grab your pattern piece J, and I'm cutting out my fusible fleece at the adult size. So I'm only doing the bottom of the strap at the child size, but I am doing the top of the strap at the adult size. So in the pattern, she says to take one of your larger, wider cuts of fusible fleece, fold them together, mark 2 inches down on the side, and 1/2 inch from the raw edges on the top. There we go. And then with these folded and lined up sticky sides together, cut from one mark to the other. This just kind of tapers off the edges. Repeat this for your other wide piece of fusible fleece. So now grab one of your fabric straps and lay it right side down, but then twist it so that the bottom, that tapered edge of the fabric strap, is up top. Grab one of the wider fusible fleece cuts and then take that same tapered edge and line that up so that it's 1/2 inch from the top shorter edge and centered. Just center it as best you can. Honestly, I just eyeball it. Now I always press fusible fleece from the right side of the fabric, so I'm going to flip this whole unit over, keeping it in place, and then I'll use my iron with some steam to press the fusible fleece into place. Once you have that wide fusible fleece pressed on, grab one of your skinny fusible fleece cuts, and we're going to line this one up 1/2 inch below the other fusible fleece and centered. What these layers do is provide a nice cushioned strap. Once again, I'm just kind of eyeballing it to keep it centered. And then I'll flip the whole unit again so that the fabric is right side up. And then I'll just press with steam from the front to hold it all in place. All right, and just check that it's all fused down. That looks good. Go ahead and repeat this with your other top of the strap. So now grab one of your top straps and rotate it so that the shorter edge is up top. Then take one of your bottom parts of the strap and we're gonna lay this right side down so the top of the slider is down. And we're gonna have the raw edge centered along the bottom of this short edge of our fabric strap. Clip this in place. Go ahead and do this with the other strap as well. Okay, so now let's take these to the sewing machine and we're going to sew one row of stitching 1/4 inch from the edge and then another row of stitching 1/2 inch from the edge. Do this on both of them. We want to hold this down 1/2 inch down. Okay, so now we're just going to work on one at a time. Lay your strap so that the fusible fleece is up. What I'm going to do is take this long right side of my strap and fold it up, and I'm just folding it around the outer edge of the fusible fleece. I'm not really measuring it, I'm just folding it around that outer edge. And then I'm using my iron to press it down all the way along the edge. So now we can open this up and fold the strap in half along those long edges, just like this. And I'm just going to clip the first 2 or 3 inches along this tapered edge. So remember, these are right sides together. It's pretty bulky because you have the bottom of the strap in there. Just don't worry about that. We're just worried about this one edge right here. We don't need to do the whole thing. So now we're going to sew from this top edge down at 1/2 inch seam allowance until we get to the crease from our iron. Then we're going to stop. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end of this. So once you have that top edge stitched just a little bit, take your strap from the inside and pull it out gently. We're pulling this so that the right side of the fabric comes out. And you'll notice when you pull it on one edge, since it's all stitched down, it's nice and neat, and on the back you see the stitches. Now what we're going to do is work on flattening out the seam inside. And you can just use your fingers to flatten out that seam allowance. And then fold down this raw edge up here, and I just kind of move around my bottom part of the strap and tuck it in so that all of those stitches are hidden, because I want it to look neat on the front and the back. So I just kind of push it down just a little bit so it's not pulled right at where it's stitched in place. Once you're happy with where it is, grab some clips and hold it together. So now what I'm going to do is work on the long edge that does not have the pressed over flap. So you can see this is the edge we pressed already, leave that. We're going to work on this edge, and I'm going to fold this up, and the fold is going to go right along that skinnier strip of fusible fleece. So I'm just wrapping the fabric up and around that skinnier part of the fusible fleece. And then I will use an iron to press that down all the way down the edge. And then what we can do is take the edge that does have that fold and fold that up and around the other edge of the skinnier fusible fleece, wrap it around there, and it should cover the raw edges of the bottom flap. And I'm just going to press that down as well. So you might have to pull it a little bit more than it wants to go. That's fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just want the strap to be straight, more so than making sure the fusible fleece is wrapped where we want it. Okay, so now I'm just going to finger press the rest and kind of eyeball it. I'm going to add some clips to the top edge that has that folded under edge. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine. and with this edge up, so this is the back of the strap, with the back of the strap up, we're gonna sew right along the edge of this top folded edge. So not even 1/8 of an inch, maybe a 1/16 of an inch from the fold, right along the center of the strap. We're also gonna top stitch this bottom edge right here to hold it in place. Then we're gonna flip the strap over and we're gonna do a second row of top stitching from the front of the strap right next to that top stitching we already have. So if you have some crazy color in your bobbin right now, you might wanna change that out so that the two threads are the same color. Isn't that just an adorable strap? I absolutely love this. And you can have a lot of fun with your prints like I did. I chose these animal prints and I centered them. These are such fun straps. So go ahead and repeat that process for your other strap, making it exactly the same way. So this is what the straps look like when they're all done. Aren't these just adorable? I love these straps. So now take your straps and with the top ends up, lay them next to each other just like this. So on this left strap here, we're gonna mark 1/2 of an inch down on the left edge from the top. We're gonna do the same thing on the right edge of the right strap. So 1/2 of an inch from the top here. And now grab your scissors and cut from that marked outer edge up to the middle of your strap. So do this on the other strap as well. So the cuts shouldn't be on the same side on each strap. You should see they go up like this. So now grab your exterior back panel and let's fold this in half to find the midpoint on the top. So I'm just gonna line up the bottom corners first and then fold around that top curve. There we go. And then I'll just cut right there. So now grab your two straps and we're going to line them up so they're about 3/4 of an inch apart from one another and centered. So honestly, just kind of eyeball this. So I'm looking at these interior corners first, and then you're gonna take your strap and kind of rotate it out so that it goes at a diagonal down. So that corner that you cut should kind of line up with the top edge. Do the same thing on the other side, just kind of rotate it out a little bit. Try to keep them centered. So now I like to clip them down on the bottom as well, just to keep everything from shifting around too much. And once you're happy with this, take it to the sewing machine and just stitch along the top curve at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember, your straps should be right side up. So everything is right side up right now. So now lay your back panel right side up. Just kind of move these straps out of the way for a moment. Take your pattern piece and line it up just along the edge. We just want to mark where our strap connectors go. So I'm just gonna kind of line it up with this bottom left corner, move it out just a little bit, and mark right on the edge of the fabric where those strap connectors go. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, just lining up this bottom right corner, and then moving it in just a bit so that I can mark placement for the strap connectors. Now starting with the right strap, I'm gonna pull it up, and I'm not twisting it, I'm keeping it all nice and straight. And I'm going to take my strap and I'm going to put it in between those two marks for my strap connector at a 45-degree angle. So you see we want this to angle up towards the center. So I have the bottom tip along the edge and then I just have it go off the edge a little bit. I'm going to clip that in place. Let's do the same thing on the other side. So keeping the strap nice and straight, lift it up. Place it so that the bottom tip is on the bottom edge of the mark that you made, and then 45 degrees up. Just angle it straight towards the center. And clip this in place as well. Okay, now let's take this to the sewing machine and stitch along the edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're just holding this down in place. Once you have those stitched down, you can go ahead and trim down the edge of the strap that's overhanging. And now your backpack straps are attached to the back. You can set this to the side. Now, if you're using zipper tape, cut your zipper tape to 19 inches long. And what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 zipper pulls to this. So we're going to add 1 on each side. To keep everything nice and even, make sure you see which prong is on top on each edge. So I'm starting on the right edge. The right prong is on top. So I'm going to open this up, insert my zipper pull, and then I'll look from the top, making sure that right prong is on top once again, and then I'll just push down my zipper pull and pull it in towards the center. Now I'm going to attach the other zipper pull on the left hand side, but I want to attach it going towards that previous zipper pull. So looking at the left hand side of my zipper tape, I see that the prong on the left is on top. So when I pull this apart, I'll insert these in to the front of my zipper pull, making sure the left hand side prong is on top, and then push down my finger and pull the zipper pull on. So then these should meet in the middle, and that way we'll be able to open the backpack with 2 zipper pulls. You can go ahead and top stitch along these raw edges if you'd like, to make sure the zipper doesn't fly off at any point. Take your top gusset front with the exterior panel and lay it right side up, and then take your zipper and lay it right side down, lining up the 2 long edges of the zipper tape and the top straight edge of your exterior panel. I'm going to use clips to hold these together. You can then take your lining E-piece and lay it right side down against the back of your zipper tape. Make sure that the curved edge is on the bottom and the straight edge is what's going against the zipper tape. And lining up that straight edge, we can just include this in the clips we already have. Now we can take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you're using a zipper foot here. Once you have the zipper stitched in place, you can pull the lining and exterior panels wrong sides together. And then you can just press this with an iron to get it nice and flat by the zipper tape. So now let's take this back to the sewing machine and top stitch along this edge by the zipper at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then you can also stitch together along this bottom curved edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have that side of the gusset attached, we're going to do the same thing with the back. So grab the right side of your back gusset, and if you have a directional print, this needs to be upside down. Take your zipper panel and lay it zipper right side down, and just line up along the long edges. Once you have that clipped on, grab the back lining panel and lay it lining right side down, and just include it in those clips along the edge of that zipper. And now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this long clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once those are sewn on, just press your lining and your exterior so that they are wrong sides together. So once you have this pressed, you can top stitch along the folded edge by the zipper at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then we'll stitch down the other long edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now grab your top handle and fold in the edges about 1 inch. If you're using the webbing, you're going to want to double fold it, but if you're using the waterproof canvas like I am, we already closed up those ends, so we can just fold each end in, like I said, about 1 inch. I'm not measuring it. You can. Now grab your top gusset panel that you just built, and then grab pattern piece D and lay it over that back top gusset, just like that. And what we want to do is we want to mark where our handle spots are. So I just put some holes right at these handle marks, and I will lay this lined up along that edge, take my fabric marker, and just mark vertical lines in those holes. So here are my 2 marks for my handles. And now what I can do is I can just line up my handle right where those marks are. And I'm gonna have it go a little bit over the mark so it covers it. And then do the same on the other side. And this is how my handle is going to be placed. You wanna eyeball it and make sure that it's not, you know, off center like that it's nice and even. But I'm going to attach this with rivets. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to poke the hole in my strap first and then use that marking for inserting it into the gusset. So grab a fabric marker and just mark a dot in the center on the back of your handle on both ends. Use your hole punch and punch out a hole where your mark is. Now line up your handle so that it's straight and covering the spot you want it to cover. And then just mark inside that hole that you punched, and that should leave a dot on your gusset panel. So once I have this one marked, I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. And I'm just gonna kind of hold it down like this so that I can make sure everything is straight and it's not too crooked. And then I'll mark a dot on my gusset through that hole just like I did on the other side. Then just use your hole punch to punch out that hole as well. So now grab your rivets. Take one of the male ends of your rivets and insert it through your strap, through the top of your strap, and then through the hole on your gusset panel. And then add the female end to the other side, just like that. Let's do the same thing with the other side of our strap. Now if you wanted, you could add a second rivet inside just to make sure it stays nice and straight like this, but I'm okay with just one rivet. So grab your rivet press and then just press down your rivet. There we go. Now we have the top strap attached to the top of the backpack. So now grab your exterior bottom gusset and lay it right side up. Take your top gusset and lay it right side down. And I know that strap kind of gets in the way. What we want to do is line up these short edges. So first line up the corner along the bottom curved edge and then just clip the entire edge together. So you have the exterior bottom gusset right sides together with the exterior top gusset. Clip the other short edge together as well. Then grab your lining panel for the bottom gusset and lay it right side down along the back of your top gusset. And then just include this in the clips. So we have a little gusset sandwich right now. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along these two short edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have these stitched together, go ahead and trim down the corners at a 45-degree angle. This will help reduce the bulk in the seams. Now flip this out so that those bottom gussets are wrong sides together. There we go. Now since I'm using a waterproof canvas here, I'm just going to finger press this, but push that seam between the two bottom gussets and then just finger press it or grab an iron and press it with an iron to get this nice and flat. Do this for both sides. All right, so now let's do some top stitching. I'm going to do a row of top stitching 1/8 of an inch on the bottom gusset side from the seam, and then another row 1/4 of an inch below that. So once you have those sides top stitched, now what we want to do is just close the edges of the bottom gusset. So we're just going to sew along these long edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to do this along both of the long edges on the bottom gusset. Okay, so that is your gusset. You can put this to the side for just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to try out something a little bit different for the slip pocket. Now the pattern piece does have you cut out 2 pieces of your lining so that you can create this slip pocket on the bottom of your lining. I'm going to actually try a mesh slip pocket. So to do that, I'm not going to cut it out exactly. I'm just going to cut it out a little bit bigger than I need it. So I'm going to grab my pattern piece and I'm going to fold along this lining pocket cut line. And I'm just going to make sure that my piece of mesh is bigger than that. So this top straight edge is what I'm going to be working with as the top edge of my pocket. And for the rest, I'm just going to do a rough cut around. Okay, so now I have this top straight edge. It's going to be the top of my pocket. And I have this folded elastic. So this is a stretchy elastic. This is from By Annie. It has a little seam that runs down the middle so you can fold it together pretty easily. So I'm just going to lay that straight cut of my mesh right along the back side of that elastic. And then I'll just fold down the elastic and add some clips. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along this elastic at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, or you can just top stitch right along the middle of the panel. So once you have that elastic attached to the top, you can just trim down the sides. It's okay if it's longer. It's supposed to be bigger than we need it anyways. Now I'm going to grab one of my lining panels and I can use this template with it folded down along that lining pocket cut line to help me place my mesh. So I'm just going to take my mesh panel and line it up along that top cut line, and then I'll just clip the sides like that. And now I can just remove the paper pattern. And now I'm just going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm just going to stitch around the lining panel but through the mesh as well at 1/4 inch seam allowance. The nice thing about mesh is that you don't have to be that particular. If it's a little wonky, a little baggy, I mean, it's totally fine. It's supposed to be, you know, stretchy. So now I'm going to flip this so that I have the wrong side of the lining facing up, and I'm just going to trim my mesh so that it's the same size as my lining panel. So now what I'm going to do for one last thing for this pocket, instead of making it one large loosey-goosey pocket, I think I'm going to sew it right down the center so it's 2 skinnier pockets. So that would work well for pens, smaller objects, things like that. So I'm going to fold my lining panel in half so that I can find the midpoints on the top and the bottom. Now I can just grab my ruler and line it up between those 2 midpoint marks. I'll grab my chalk pencil and just do my best to chalk through the mesh. Alright, so now I'm just going to top stitch along this midpoint mark. I'm going to make sure I back stitch really well at the top as well. I am really loving this bright yellow with this bright pink. Isn't that fun? So there's just, you know, another option for your lining pocket. So now grab your back exterior panel and lay it wrong side up, as flat as you can get it. And then take your lining panel with the pocket and lay that wrong side down so that they are wrong sides together. And then what we want to do is match up all of the edges and clip it together. You might find it easier to work with the right side of the back panel facing up and laying that down over the wrong side of your lining panel. Since there's so much bulk here, it's kind of hard to get that flat. Okay, once you have the back panel attached to the back lining, go ahead and set that to the side. Grab your front panel and the other lining piece, and we'll just do the same thing. I'm going to attach it with the right side of the exterior up and the wrong side of the lining up, and just line them up both perfectly. And then just clip all around the edge to hold it in place. Okay, so now we can take both of these to the sewing machine and just sew along the entire edge of each one at 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're just holding the back panel to the lining panel. Okay, so now you just have your bag in 3 sections. We just have to add them all together and then we're done. So let's start with the front panel. You can take the back panel and move it to the side. Grab your gusset panel and pull it so that the side seams match up with one another, and then just tug along that edge And then clip this top mark right here. We're finding the midpoints everywhere. So you're gonna find the midpoint on this side and then the midpoint on the back of that top gusset as well. Repeat that to find the midpoints on the bottom gusset on both ends. Then if you haven't already marked the midpoints on your front panel, go ahead and do that. Just fold it in half and mark the midpoint on the bottom and on the top. You can grab your paper template and lay it right over and use the marks on here to mark the side parts for your gusset as well. So you can see there's those little marks here. It said gusset seam point. So just line up those center points on the top and the bottom and then mark where the gusset sides are gonna go on both sides. And now grab your gusset and with the skinnier side of the gusset, so this is your front gusset, lay that right side down against the right side of your front exterior panel and match up those top midpoint marks. Rotate this around and then flip your gusset if you need to so that it all lines up correctly. And then take the right side of the exterior bottom and lay that right side down against the right side of your front panel bottom and clip in place. And then match up that seam that connects the top gusset and the bottom gussets together with that side gusset mark that you just made. Clip together. Do the same on the other side. I just realized that I accidentally switched my exterior and lining bottom gussets. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. So here we go. Now all we have to do is go around these curves and clip the gusset to the front panel. Now because we're using waterproof canvas, there is no stretch at all, which can be helpful for the most part. So I'm gonna do the top curves first and then I'll do the bottom curves after that. It makes it easier if you unzip this top zipper. So once you have the top part clipped, just go ahead and rotate this. And if you're having a really hard time getting this all lined up around these corners down here, you can clip into your gusset just a little bit to help that spread out. But you don't wanna clip more than 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to do my best to force the gusset around that corner and then I'll clip it as I need to. So I'm just gonna clip into these corners just a little bit. She recommends just maybe 3 clips, 1 inch apart. There we go. And that will just help you spread out that gusset. So I will unclip and reclip these corners just so I can get this nice and straight and not so bubbly. Do the same on the other side. So if you're having a lot of bubbling or anything like that, she does suggest in the pattern to make sure you clip this so that it's kind of like a bowl shape on the back of the main panel, because that's how we want it to look in the end as well. Okay, so now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. It's easiest if you sew it with the gusset side, the back of the gusset facing up, and just stitch around like that. Just go slow, use a stiletto to help hold everything together. If we miss some spots, we can always go back over and fix it. So don't worry if you make a couple mistakes. You don't have to rip everything out. We can always fix spots. Okay, so using this waterproof canvas is definitely challenging with those corners. So I'm just gonna kind of flip it out a little bit to see how bad that puckering is, because I don't mind it if it's just like a little bit. See, like this corner here It did pleat a tiny bit, but it doesn't look bad, so I'm okay with it. Let's see about the other corner. The other corner I feel like was a little bit worse. So here's the other corner, and I don't know if you can see, but there's a little bit of a pucker right there. To be completely honest, I am okay with that. I don't think it needs to be completely perfect. So I'm happy with that. So now just go around the entire exterior, making sure you caught all of the pieces of the bag. You should be good. Okay, there we go. Now you can do another row of stitching around this if you'd like, but honestly, we're gonna do that when we attach the binding. So I'm gonna wait until then to do that. Okay, so once you have one side attached, we just have to do the same thing with the other side. So this side is a little bit more tricky because it has all of this. What I like to do is just kind of bunch it all up in the middle as best I can. You can use some clips here to clip it in place so it doesn't, you know, shift around on you. Grab your pattern piece for the backpack, and you just need to mark those side gusset points. Now, grab your front panel and gusset, and we're gonna lay this. So the right side of the back gusset top panel is gonna go right side down against the right side of your back panel. Line up those midpoint marks. Clip together there. And then let's line up the bottom as well. And then those side seams should line up with your side mark. And do the same thing on the other side. And then just go around the entire back panel, clipping the gusset to the edge of your main panel. Once you get around these sharp corners, you can just cut into the gusset just a little bit to help you spread that out. Those bottom corners are definitely the trickiest part of this whole bag. So remember, this is easiest if you're pushing the back panel down and creating a bowl shape. All right, once you have all that clipped together, now let's just take it to the sewing machine and sew along the clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, we're gonna sew it with the gusset side up. So this gets a little difficult because this is so big, especially if you're using waterproof canvas. This is sticking up pretty far. Just do your best to remember to crumple this side out of the way. Don't try to keep this all neat and pretty while you're sewing. It's gonna make it harder. Crumple this stuff out of the way. Push everything you're not working on out of the way. We will flatten it all out later. Okay, once that's done, let's just take a look at all of our edges, make sure everything was caught. We don't have any pieces that didn't get under the needle. Everything looks pretty good. Again, I've got a couple spots here where there's a little bit of a pleat, but I'm okay with all of that. All right, so that is definitely the hardest part of this bag, these bottom corners right here. It does just take practice. If you have any spots down here where it's just really pleated or it's skipped a spot or it's just really wonky, just unpick that area that's giving you trouble, flatten it out, cut what you need to, and then go back and just re-sew that area. You don't have to re-sew the whole thing. So if you want to go around a second time and do another row of stitches, you can definitely do that. It will not be as difficult as the first time. It's much, much easier to just quickly run this under the machine now that you have all of that stitched down. Now let's attach the binding. Now this is how I do it. It might not be the most professional way to do it, but it's how I do it. I just take my 1-inch cut of waterproof canvas, and with the wrong side down, I just hug it over the raw edge. And then I clip it on. And I just clip it around the entire raw edge. Just like this. It should be bigger than our seam allowance. That's my goal. If you use waterproof canvas that's the same color as your lining, you won't even notice this. And I just find this is easier than making my own binding and trying to catch both edges. So I'm just clipping this around almost the entire outer edge. If you have some edges that are just too wide for your binding, you can always take your scissors and trim those down, just to make sure our binding can wrap around the entire raw edge. So I'm just gonna go around, and I'm not cutting into the stitching, I'm just trimming this down just a little bit. All right, once I get to the end of my binding, I'm just gonna kind of pin that out of the way. I wanna be able to adjust this if I need to in the end. So now I'm just gonna take this to the sewing machine, and again, with the gusset side up, I'm going to sew my binding in place. Now you can sew this 3/8 of an inch in from the folded edge, or maybe 1/8 of an inch in, or you can just sew right along the middle, honestly, however it's easiest for you. The goal is that we're going to catch the binding on the top and the bottom. So I wouldn't get too close to this raw edge. I would keep it, you know, closer, more towards the middle. So as you can see, I'm not that worried about like pleats on the corners of my binding. I don't think it needs to be that perfect. This right here kind of bugs me, but I'm gonna let it go. Overall, it looks great. So you can see where I have the white binding on the white waterproof canvas, you wouldn't even really be able to notice a difference. So if you're using waterproof canvas and you use the same color, it works out really well. So now we're just gonna repeat that with the other side. Once again, I'm gonna go here and just kind of trim down some of the areas where the seam is a little bit bigger than I want it to be, just to make it easier for me with the binding. I know 1-inch binding seems pretty wide, but especially if you're using thicker fabric or foam, these seams get very, very thick, and you just want to be able to cover up all of the stitches. It's kind of the point of the binding, is to hide the raw edges and cover up these stitches. So once again, I'm just going to take my waterproof canvas binding, and with the wrong side against the seam, I'm just going to wrap it around, grab some clips, and then just clip it around almost the entire edge. You'll see this top edge here is a little thick, so I'm just going to trim that down again. And this won't affect the design of your bag. All right, once I get towards the end of my binding, again, I'm just gonna kind of fold it back so that I can finish it at the sewing machine. So now let's take this and again, just sew along the clipped edge to put the binding in place. As you saw, I'm pretty much sewing right along the middle of the binding. So there you go. Now that's the last binding attached. As you saw, I had some spots that didn't get caught on both sides, so I just went back over it and just stitched it from the other side. Honestly, if you use the same color thread as your binding, you can get away with a lot here and it will still look really nice. So now all we have to do is flip out our bag so that it's right side out. Look how sweet that is. And by using the waterproof canvas in the gusset, that really helps it stay firm around the top gusset here. So yeah, this holds its shape really, really nicely. If you just use quilt cotton, this can kind of collapse on itself, but with that waterproof canvas, wowza. So I was planning on putting rivets down here on our strap tabs. I don't really think it needs it, but we can go ahead and add them anyways. So I'm just gonna mark a dot on my strap tabs. It's for the most part centered, and that's where we can add our rivets. It'll just give it a nice little pop of bling down there. So once again, I'll just grab my hole punch tool and punch out the hole. Make sure I don't get any other fabric in there. I'm gonna do this on both sides. Can then grab my rivets and just pop those into the holes. So now I'm just gonna insert this into my rivet press and press down. Do the same thing on the other side. And there we go. That gives it a really nice professional finish. This bag is seriously adorable. Okay, so what do you think? Is your left arm a little tired? I know for me, doing the curves, doing those final like 4 steps, the final construction of the main panel, the back panel, and then the binding on both of them, I hold the bag with my left hand and I'm like making sure it doesn't slip and get anywhere so that the needle is nice and straight, you know, and this arm starts to hurt after a little bit. But you know what? You just stretch it out because it's totally worth it. Look how amazing this bag is. Oh, this is the type of pattern. This is the type of pattern that you buy fabric for. And you know what I mean? It's like you go shopping online or in the store and you see fabric and you say, that would be beautiful on the mini backpack. Like this is, you don't just like buy the fabric. It's like, oh, it's pretty. You think I need to make a mini backpack version with that fabric and I need to get that for the pocket. This is a pattern I personally adore. So for this version, again, we use quilt cotton. We have this beautiful front pocket. We did the double zipper on top this time instead of just a single zipper, which obviously you should definitely do. That waterproof canvas for the lining, especially for the gusset, allows it to really stay firm. So let me show you. So for example, on this bag, you see how it's a little squishy right here because I only use quilt cotton for the lining and the exterior on that gusset. However, on this version, I use quilt cotton for the exterior, but that waterproof canvas for the lining, and it's very, very firm. You know, it doesn't squish very easily. I really like that. So if you want a more structured bag without having to add any sort of Decoville light and without having to add any sort of interfacing really to the sides, you know, the gussets, I suggest using waterproof canvas for the lining. I think that this is a great, great bag pattern. I mean, just look at those straps. Look at that. And personally, since I changed the bottom part to be the child size, but I left the top part of the strap as adult size, this is the perfect size for me. Now, I'm 5'4". I'm a bit on the petite side, so I will put this on so you can see. So here's what the backpack looks on the front. You can see these straps. This is fun. Definitely have some fun with these straps. Don't just kind of pass by the straps. Do something fun with the print here. And then when I turn around, you see it fits really nicely. It hangs a little bit higher, which is something I like. Let me show you the other version. So for the Christmas bag, I actually used the adult size straps on the top and bottom, and I made them as short as they would go, but it's still a little low for me. Now, if you're a little bit taller, this might be the perfect size for you. But you can see for me, it just hangs a little bit low. Now, and not too low, but just a little bit lower than I want it to be. So play around with this. There are so many adjustments you can make. So if you're a beginner sewer and this is one of the first kind of curvy backpack patterns you're really interested in trying, my suggestion to make this as easy as possible would be to use fusible fleece for the front and back panels. Use waterproof canvas for the bottom. I really think you're going to be happy you have a firmer base. So use some waterproof canvas for the bottom. If you want to use waterproof canvas here, I would stay away from vinyl if you're just starting out. Vinyl, depending on what kind of vinyl you're using, it can be a little tricky. So I would skip the vinyl personally. I would use quilt cotton for the exterior, again, quilt cotton for the straps. For the lining, I would use quilt cotton. I would just go ahead and do that because the waterproof canvas is going to make this a little bit firmer, a little bit more difficult with the curves. But I would still use that waterproof canvas trick on the binding because it's just so quick and easy and you don't really have to worry about it being that neat. And then, yeah, and then I would still do the mesh pocket because the mesh pocket is super easy. It's super cute. It's just... I love this pattern so much. I'm going to say it. I've been thinking about it all night, and I'm going to say it. This, so far, is my favorite pattern of 2020. So far. Now, we're not done with the year. We still got a few more weeks left in the year. But so far for 2020, this is my favorite pattern. No, it is not the easiest pattern that we've done this year, but to me, it has the most beautiful finish. It's something I would personally use all the time. It's a beautiful gift bag. It's just so professional looking without needing all the professional stuff. You know, I didn't do this on an industrial machine. I didn't use leather. I didn't use vinyl. but this is something I would honestly see in a store, in a boutique. So, my favorite pattern of 2020, I said it, it's my favorite one. It's just so cute. So, I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I really, really hope you give this pattern a shot. If you do and you post it on social media, please make sure you tag me. I'm at OklaRoots. Also make sure you tag Caroline. She's Kandou Crafts. I'll have links for all of our socials down in the description of this video. If you're not on social and you want to show me, send me an email at jessica@oklaroots.com. Thank you so much for sewing with me today. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye.